The timely topic that the club is bringing to you. And on behalf of the President, Paulette, and the entire board, thank you for coming. I took a minute and looked up the word attribution from a definition standpoint in dictionary.com today. And its roots go back to the 1400s, but we'll leave it as that and say we're going to bring the definition today up to today's marketing 2016 standards, if you will. And I'd like to introduce the moderator and panel. Moderating today's panel is Andy Joyce, Vice President of Strategic Services Group at Merit Direct. The Strategic Services Group at Merit is a direct consulting and analytics division within the company, and its mission is to measure and improve direct marketing ROI across all channels and audiences for their clients. James Farah, Director of Client Development from Conversant Media, joins us on the panel. James has over 15 years of sales and business development experience, spending the last 9 years using the latest marketing innovations to help advertisers exceed their short-term and long-term goals. So, resident expert here for you today. John Young, Senior Vice President of Analytics at Epsilon. John. John has general management responsibilities for 125 plus members of the analytic consulting group at Epsilon. Responsibilities there include design and consultation on various database marketing analytic engagements, including predictive modeling, segmentation, measurement, and profiling. And last on the panel is Will Clayton, Senior Vice President of Digital Product Management from Wyoming. Just a quick word. A lot of these panelists are not local New York City, so I want to send our appreciation for the travel and spending the time today. As everybody knows here, time is precious at every business, and the fact that James, John, Will, and Andy have given their time today, we want to send a warm welcome. Thank you. So without further ado, Andy, may I ask you to step up, please? And the panelists as well, take your seats. We'll begin. Again, ask questions if you have any, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Thanks very much. All right, so attribution, multi-channel attribution is a big, thorny topic, so I think the group kind of decided that we should start with some vocabulary alignment. So, let's see. I guess this will cycle through, right? Maybe before we get to the slide, I wanted to tell you guys about this thing that we talk about in my group called the bungee jump concept. And we're going to try to tackle this big thorny topic with a bungee jump sort of concept. And so what that means is we stay high level, and then we hop down into the weeds for a little bit, and then we always snap back up, right? So back and forth, making sure we understand the high level and the details down in the weeds. So from a definition standpoint, we would like to submit to you a definition of multi-channel attribution that is, what we're trying to do is give credit for a definable business outcome, like an order or a white paper download or a registration, back to a company's marketing efforts. Okay, so there's channels that you're putting effort into to try to to try to create a definable business outcome. All right, so this will cycle through. So I think the other bucket that we wanted to talk about are two types of channels. So we would like you guys to think about channels as being addressable or non-addressable. And what do I mean by that? Addressable media is where you know the intended recipient of your direct marketing solicitation. So that would be direct mail, email, telemarketing, certain types of display. We know the person to whom we are talking, right? Non-addressable media, these are things like paid search, broadcast media in some cases, print advertising, where we're gonna put our message in front of who we hope is the right person. So addressable and non-addressable, this has been kind of a useful definition, I think, for my team and also for this group. All right, so let's get into the discussion here. So this first one is for everybody in the group. I think maybe James will start with you. So the first question is, what percentage of the clients or the marketers that you work with are attempting multi-channel attribution, and what grade would you give them?
So, you guys hear me? So, for the current advertisers that I work with intimately on a day-to-day basis, a lot of them are primarily digital. They're almost 100% digital, and I would say that we are actively having conversations about how all their different channels should be kind of tracked and what credit should be attributed back to those different channels. Looking back historically, though, with advertisers that had both offline and online aspects to their campaigns, a lot of times the offline part of it was never even a topic of conversation. So in terms of a grade, I feel like you have to at least enroll in the class to get a grade. In this case, I didn't feel like they were even enrolled. So.
Will, what do you think?
So at Weiland, we deliver audiences, and fundamentally the programs that I build, I'm responsible for the digital aspects of using a Weiland audience. So my programs are all fundamentally addressable, and the magic thing about that is it's fundamentally cross-channel, cross-device, very, very powerful for attribution. Bringing that to clients, we have to help them understand the relationship between that. Clients that come out of direct marketing, they get that. It's addressable. I can hold people out. I can measure people. Trying to help them bring together their own digital teams with their direct marketing teams, not always easy for exactly the reasons that we talked about, which is trying to mix addressable and non-addressable. So my clients, specifically 100%, do they get it? Not always, but that's what we're working to help correct.
John, how about a grade?
Okay, well at Epsilon I would say in my experience less than 20% of the clients are attempting multi-channel attribution, and that's a pretty consistent number regardless of the industry or the size of the client. Unfortunately, collectively I'd have to give those clients that are trying it an I for incomplete, right? Because they're just, I mean this kind of is reflective of where the business is with attribution right now. It's a hot topic. Lots of people think they need to do it, and they do, but they're still trying to get their heads around it. So it's a work in progress.
Good question for the panel. Is this a function of the speed of technology changing so fast that your comments are taken as they are? Is it adaptability? Where do you kind of see that falling, that clients are in these various stages that we just described?
Why are they getting bad grades?
Yeah, yeah, nicely said.
Well, I'll offer a quick perspective. I think it's because it's hard. There's lots and lots of data that exists at every single client that is in multiple silos. The CERC people have their data over here. The email people, their data sits at the email service provider somewhere, right? There's stuff sitting in Google Analytics somewhere else, and things are fractured, and so it is really difficult to even put things together in the first place. And then once you go through all of that hard work, what do you do with it all when it gets there? So, let's be fair. I don't think what we're talking about is easy.
Thank you.
You guys want to add anything to that?
I would agree that one reason it's not easy, but also the other part is kind of the silos you were talking about. The CERC guys, the email guys, the search guys, the Google Analytics, everybody still very much operates in silos, and a lot of times those silos aren't necessarily aligned in terms of hitting the same overarching goal.
And I think the technology is bringing more and more pieces of data to the table. And as the CMO, you're the most fired executive level person. And when the data starts saying that you've got 4 teams and they each take 70% of the credit for your conversions, you got to figure out a way to reconcile that. So I think that's partly how we got here.
So let's unpack this data sitting in silos sort of question. Is there an 80-20? And we'll start with you, John. Is there an 80-20 here? Can I get 80% of the benefit for attribution with 20% of the effort? Where do you start?
Yeah, in my view, it's not an all or nothing sort of proposition. I think that's part of the problem some organizations have and why they struggle with this. They think they have to kind of boil the ocean right when they start. And I would very much counsel against that. I think it's a very phased and measured approach to get to ultimately a good solution. So I think there is an 80-20 rule. I also think the quality of the solution is a function of the level of effort as well as the approach you take with the solution. I think the key thing to do is when you're doing multi-channel attribution, you're doing it for some direct marketing program. You have to sit down and look at that program. What are all the different channels you're using? What are all the different communications? What is the mix that you're using? And figure out where do I need to spend my time. If a lot of my money and impressions are in these channels, I need to be very good at figuring out what is the incrementality of those channels and focus on that first, and then worry about the lesser channels as I get farther along.
So you're kind of in favor of don't let perfect be the enemy of good with this, it sounds like. Okay. All right, so Will, I've got one for you. So we talked about addressable and non-addressable media, and I think you mentioned earlier that the folks that work in addressable media, they kind of get it. But it is a multi-channel world. So my question for you is, offline multi-channel attribution in the addressable world is difficult but achievable. What are you seeing to help people bridge and take some of those addressable media practices into this non-addressable world, particularly with online advertising? This is for James and for Will.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, the nice thing about addressable media is I can take a holdout sample and it will remain a holdout sample because I know exactly who's in that group. I can apply that across all addressable channels. So I can take my direct mail, addressable digital, I can take addressable TV, anything that's addressable, I can combine those programs and I can do fundamentally cross-channel, cross-device attribution on them. If I do that right, then I still have these huge, essentially broadcast media levers that I can move. So being careful to separate and carefully measure addressable differently from non-addressable, I think, is the key to all of this. Because at the end of the day, if I do a holdout, everything that changed within that holdout group is due to something other than my addressable practices. And that works really well if you can apply that separation.
That's well said, James. What about, how do we take some of those addressable best practices into the non-addressable world online?
Well, I think overall, when you look at the market, there's been a lot of advances where you can take an addressable audience and now reach them online. There's a lot of vendors, data companies out there where you can take your list, you can upload it, and then reach those same audiences on their smartphones, their tablets, their PCs. So let's say you have a direct mail list and you're messaging these folks offline. You now have the opportunity to complement those offline messages with online messages, and you can also measure the effectiveness of those two channels together. And also kind of the flip side of that, or the other side is, how does your online media efforts kind of impact your offline sales? And there are now a lot of companies, Conversant being one of them, that does a phenomenal job in actually measuring the impact that your online media has on both your offline and online sales. So a lot of advances.
Yeah, it sounds like it's about bringing the good old-fashioned discipline to the no matter what the sort of arena is. I'm sorry, real quick. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Question kind of based on what Will, you were saying.
Yeah.
So in the ecosystem, in the marketing ecosystem that any particular company's in, and you can do holdout panels on multi-addressable media, and then there's what you were saying, the broadcast media that's not necessarily addressable. But if you were to do holdout panels pretty consistently, could that mean that a company doesn't need to spend an arm and a leg on a CRM system? Most of their stuff is addressable, and then they can sort of take some sort of, dare I say the term out loud, whitemail attribution towards the non-addressable space and have it measured. If you did that 3 or 4 times a year,
Right.
do you think that lends itself more towards, not necessarily a solution, but more towards healthy assumptions?
I do, and I think that the things that we're talking about today is how can we get to the point where we really truly believe I did this and it caused this group of identifiable people to do what I wanted, or something that was beneficial. And yeah, I do believe that you can break that down by segment, and anybody who's not addressable, that's the remainder that you're trying to influence. Is that what you were asking?
Sorry, and then that's the leading question. So then my real question is that are attribution platforms offering the capabilities to do some of that holdout testing specifically and what a marketer doesn't want is to spend money and not measure it as part of the whole. Because, right, it's a big fire in the middle, right, and everything's feeding the fire, and the more money you spend, the higher that fire goes, sometimes you have to spend more money, less money, etc. So, I'm just wondering, the platforms out there, offer that kind of split, sort of A/B testing, across all addressable media.
And I would say probably not. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say most platforms are designed to identify attributable, not necessarily attributed, but attributable activity within their own sphere of influence. And trying to get to where a platform is ready to give you an answer that is more accurate and believable rather than just bigger, that's a hard sell. That same CMO, if you go and say, hey, that number you got is big but wrong, we'd like you to shrink that down when you take your next report to the CEO, that's a tough sell.
If I may, and we were talking about this earlier at this table, but I bump into sometimes advertisers doing TV media and digital media and direct mail. To me, these three mediums are very hard to measure together.
Yeah.
Direct mail is at least measurable and will drive traffic, and you can make some. But once you throw TV into the mix, especially, that becomes very difficult to have one CRM to take care of everything. And the three of you don't have to answer it now. If it comes up, that'd be great. But I would love to hear some thoughts on that at some point, specifically with the TV as the outlier.
Yeah, and I'll shut up after I say this, but I think there's two forces right now. One is an increased desire for consumer privacy, and that is fighting with the increased capability to make all of that media addressable. Addressable television has been kicking around in test for years. Addressable online is a reality within the scope of people that will accept it. Those two forces are going to keep pushing. Marketers want to know who they're talking to, and privacy advocates, some of them just flat out say, no, we don't ever want you to know who we are. There will be a middle ground where we end up.
Well, what do you mean by hold out now?
So if it's addressable, if I have an audience of people I want to talk to, just like direct mail, I sent my catalog to 95% of the list, I kept 5% out to see what they did anyway because of that fire that we taught. That's the strength of my brand. Some of them were going to do that anyway.
It's the only way to truly measure the incrementality of that particular channel.
So it's like a control?
It's a
Yes.
control group.
Yep.
Exactly like sure.
Yeah, so with regard to that, okay, so with the holdout panels, maybe it's something you've done or just posting this as a way to measure the unaddressable marketing. Over time, if you're looking at all the holdout panels, do you see, you could potentially see influences in the response rates or the purchases made, whatever you're tracking, for those holdout panels that are ultimately being affected by the unaddressable marketing.
Well,
Does that make sense?
it's a great point. Ultimately what those hold-up panels are doing for you is they are a means by which you measure the impact of your non-addressable medium.
Right.
Specifically a global control group that's withheld from all the direct marketing activity. And somewhat to the question that was asked over here a minute ago, I think a good attribution solution is one that not only allows you to fairly accurately understand the impact of the granular communications you're using within your addressable channels, but also takes into account those non-addressable channels. The issue I have with a lot of the point solutions that are out there in the market, the forest or wave type solutions, is they don't explicitly account for what I call unattributed revenue, which is the revenue, what I'd like to think of as natural revenue, or revenue that occurs in the absence of any direct marketing. And by not accounting for that, you are by definition over-crediting the direct channels.
Right. No, and I understand that, but I'm just wondering if you looked at like even just the trending of, I suppose you could, right, from one campaign to the next for those holdout panels, you could then see also the impact, through trending from the unaddressable efforts, right?
Right. What you want to be careful is not to compare unaddressable people one-to-one with addressable people. The fact that you are addressable online says something about your likelihood to purchase through measurable channels. So you have to be careful to do apples to apples.
Could I just ask a common sense question? Okay. The question of attribution, doesn't it really fall one level below the chief marketing officer level? Here's what I'm saying. The chief marketing officer of a company is responsible for the overall success of a campaign. Clearly his performance, his or her performance, will be measured on the ROI of that marketing campaign. I spent $5 million on my marketing campaign, I get a 35% or 150% ROI against that. We all know that in our own habits, we could be getting from a marketer a catalog that comes to our house. We can also be getting a PR message that has appeared someplace else to tell us something good about that catalog. We get, which is earned media, which we haven't even talked about. We can also be getting an email and a print ad, all targeting us, and they surrounding us with all these marketing messages. Then ultimately we buy. The CMO is happy for this if he or she gets a high return on investment. So, common sense wise, are we not making a fuss over attribution? And attribution really is not the critical thing, but it's the total ROI of a marketing campaign.
So you're right, the level right below that CMO is the silo. I've got my direct mail team, I've got...
Right.
So when you look at that and say, boy, we did great because I gave everybody some money and they produced results, now I got to figure out for next year which one of those silos gets more money and who gets less. And I think that's the foundational to what we're trying to talk about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except it's an artificial subtraction from the marketing reality. The marketing reality is that we all have various influences upon us. A good marketer is going to try to touch all of those touch points in order to get us to respond. And it's very difficult to identify which media should be held accountable for success because it's everyone working together. Oftentimes, we would get a catalog at home, right? But we don't place the order on the catalog. The catalog drives us to the website. Or the catalog that drives us to the retail store. How do you attribute that? So that isn't really the argument that the money that's being spent on attribution should really be spent on re-educating the CMO, get rid of the silo blocks, give these guys bonuses for the effort they're doing on a qualitative basis, on a quantitative basis, because we can't measure it.
Well, I mean, I would say that before you can truly accomplish multi-channel attribution, and this gets back to the comment earlier about a phased approach, you need to understand how each of those addressable channels you use is doing in isolation, and that's the beauty of a simple test and control design. It allows you to unequivocally answer the question of, this is the incrementality of this particular channel, and also the specific communications I use within that channel. Without those building blocks in place, you're not going to be able to create a viable multi-channel attribution solution. So I think you have a good point, but you're not done once you've measured each channel in isolation. To your point, most people, most consumers are receiving multiple communications from multiple addressable channels, and the real trick is to tease out, okay, what is the relative influence of all those addressable media on the ultimate behavior that I'm measuring, which is typically sales.
Yeah, see, when all of us first got into this industry called direct marketing, the only medium that we were really doing that was really traceable was direct mail. So we're able to generate on a direct mail campaign, no matter which I can track an ROI against that campaign. Is it working or it's not working? But then all of a sudden the internet booms. We've got all these multiple forces that are taking place. It becomes difficult. And what happens is that marketing departments create these various silos. You take care of this, as Will said, you take care of this, you take care of this. Well, all these guys want to get a bonus and credit at the end of the year for generating revenue for the company. But is that a true measure?
So, I have a question for you that take the internet completely out of the equation,
right,
and say we're going to go back in time and you're going to have your direct marketing team, and then over on the other side of the hall is your broadcaster, your television, radio, print team, and they also are doing good work and they also are driving your success. And even no internet, somebody has to decide how much success is direct marketing driving versus the TRP broadcast activity. And I think that's the same thing we're talking about today. We have more addressable channels, direct mail, some digital channels, and we still have these non-addressable, and there will always be a need to guess or measure which side of the hall is going to get more money. And if not, then, I mean, we're up here because we believe that's true and that we can help measure that. So, but it's a great point. It's hard here.
I guess what my point of view would be the aspiration is to try on a one-to-one basis to optimize the spend. On you, maybe respond better to email. I shouldn't be just siloing email and email some macro contribution. It's this individual based on this data suggests that the right touch points and the right amount of spend is something. This person is something else, this person is something else. And the CMO should be responsible for managing on as finite a population as possible to spend appropriately by channel. one-to-one.
All right, so let's shift from the philosophical back down into like how do we have.
And roll that up.
So I guess what I'd like to ask the group, and I'll start with you, John, is if I'm starting from scratch, if I've got, I'm a marketer who does direct mail, paid search, and email. So make it simple. If I'm starting from scratch, how much of that data do I need to get in front of me before I can have a hope of success? In some type of multi-channel attribution project. Where's the 80-20 for data aggregation?
Well, I think it's a function of the specific direct marketing program that you're trying to do attribution for. Again, you have to look at what are all the channels and all the marketing communications I'm using in those addressable channels. Which of that data can I get more easily? What do I think is going to be most influential, and focus on at least trying to get that data and ascertaining the incrementality of that those particular channels and those communications within the channel. I mean, to me, that's the logical starting point. And back to the earlier discussion, to really understand how a channel and specific communications in that channel are doing, you need that basic kind of test and control strategy, which, by the way, companies should be doing anyway, because it's marketing 101. Forget about multi-channel attribution, because I get a lot of pushback on that point. It's like, well, we can't do multi-channel attribution because we don't even have control groups in place. And I'm like, well, shame on you. You should be doing this anyway, and if you're not, your CFO should be breathing down your neck, because otherwise you have no way of, in a defensible manner, saying this is how this channel is contributing to my sales. So that's the right starting point from my standpoint.
Okay. Will, where do we start? Data aggregation.
Yeah, so, and I think this will fit with my other comments. I need to get down to the point where I can change one variable and see what happens. And that's foundational to all of this. And part of that is just getting your teams on the same page. I remember years and years ago when I started in digital, I had a digital team and they were talking about their results. They said, yeah, every year about mid-November, we just get this giant spike in online orders. It's awesome. We think it must be Christmas. I say, well, you know that your company sends out a huge catalog every year in mid-November. No, we didn't know that. Literally, and that was a decade ago. This is a brave new world, but getting to the point where I know what's going to change things already, and then I have some lever that I can change in isolation, and that is the trick. Because most of the time when I change some piece of a marketing program, I've influenced other things. So John's spot on. If I can get a reliable holdout, if I can get one variable, I can figure out what my activity does, and that's what we're trying to do.
So let's talk about people. All right. Data is great, but businesses are run by humans, right? So this question is I'm going to start with you, James, but I want to hear from the entire panel on this. What are some real life human challenges you've seen in trying to bring this concept of attribution to a marketing department?
So we've touched on it a little bit already. It's you have these different silos that people live in, and I think Will put it appropriately. You've got 4 different channels taking credit for 300% sales. So you can only equal 100% at the end of the day. So you have humans, and I think this gentleman over here mentioned they want to hit their bonuses. So really, they don't really regard the other silos that are out there because they're focused on their bonus, and a lot of times there are structures set up where it almost encourages behavior where, again, you're dealing with humans that are trying to pay their bills or make sure that their company succeeds or looks successful kind of on their watch. It's not necessarily done in alignment with some of the other silos or other departments. So I think that human factor, you almost need kind of a referee, if you will. Maybe that's somebody that's just under the CMO that is kind of holding everybody accountable for all their sales only equaling 100% versus 300% when everything's said and done.
John, what do you think? Human stories for bringing attribution to a client.
Well, I think James hit on some of the key points there. I mean, where I've seen this really create issues, and it happens quite a bit, is most organizations, the way they go to market, they have channel managers. They don't have segment managers, and channel marketers are all for multi-channel attribution as long as the results show that their channel is doing well. They don't feel like their budgets are going to be threatened or encroached upon. But the minute the results go the other way, they're the first to jump in and say and discredit the result. And so, where this tends to break down is in those organizations, which again tend to be still the rule rather than the exception, where you have channel managers, not segment managers, getting all of them on the same page, because as the point was made, it's a zero-sum game. And that's where it breaks down, and as a result of that, the results do not get acted upon, and the solution, as good as it might be, just sits on a shelf somewhere.
So Will, let's build on something John just mentioned. So John talked about channel managers versus segment managers. That to me almost sounds like he's making some type of an organizational structure observation. What is the ideal, in your experience, org structure to take learnings from multi-channel attribution sort of project and implement them effectively? Talk to us about organizational structure.
So I think there's a lot of organizations that can work. In any successful organization, the CMO's role is not going to be to manage those silos and make sure everybody's happy with their number. It's going to be to help them talk, make them talk if they need to. There's a strong technology component to it. I mean, we heard a couple of years ago they started batting around this notion of a chief marketing technology officer. And as a CMO, I look at that and say, hey, if you're the CMO and you get marketing, and then you have a chief marketing technology officer who gets technology and marketing, we kind of don't need you. So there's a strong technology role, and part of that is helping, I want to circle back to the people problems, part of that is helping people to question things that they don't want to question. I've got a system that I believe in, and I don't want to ever have to question it regardless of what other data comes in. And so part of that is helping to identify what's authoritative and what is directionally useful. If I use Google Analytics, I'm never going to get an answer that's anything other than buy more Google. It is incredibly directionally helpful, but you can't look at it and say any data that contradicts Google Analytics is wrong. You have to be able to figure out how to make those get along.
So James, do we want a customer retention manager who's responsible for circulation, email, paid search, telemarketing, or like? Is it reasonable? Is it what's the word? Is it practical to think of having someone in charge of segments versus channels? What have you seen in your experience?
Where I've seen it work, and again, this is not necessarily set up where there's like a referee or manager, but it's a lot of it sounds silly, it goes back to kind of the corporate culture where people are willing to question things that, like you're saying, you've got a system, I've used it for 5 years and it's working, where people are really aligned with the company's goals, culturally speaking, versus having somebody refereeing them. So I think that regardless of your structure, I think kind of culturally having people that are dedicated and trying to do what's best for the company and to hit those goals regardless of, hey, you know what, email is stinky, it's going to get cut by 20%, but you know what, we can reallocate that into direct mail, into TV, to something else that is going to drive the result. And I've personally, in my experience, have found that culturally, when people are on the same page and working towards the same goal, and they're not really as worried about, this is going to make me look bad or this person look bad, they're really focused on the end result, that's what moves the needle the most, versus kind of a referee. But in the absence of that, kind of some kind of a referee or something like that would probably be a good start.
I think it makes sense. Yeah, please.
Let me just ask, sort of following up on that point. I think there's